many ways. He had, the Prime Minister accompanied him for the Sabarmati Ashram visit, and after that they met over dinner. So they had a round of discussions, obviously, over dinner. And then this morning we had delegation level talks as well. Earlier in the day there was a groundbreaking ceremony for the high-speed rail project. And in the afternoon we have a business event, which I think many of you would be seeing. Now what we have done is we have captured many of the aspects of the discussions in the joint statement. It is a somewhat lengthy joint statement, but that's frankly because there is been really a lot to discuss and a lot of outcomes of what is a very rapidly growing relationship. I think if you look at the theme, the title of the joint statement, that itself in many ways speaks for the state of the relationship. It is titled "Towards a Free, Open and Prosperous Indo-Pacific." And the broad thrust of the discussions yesterday and today have been about how to really elevate the level of the special strategic and global partnership between the two countries. And the approach of the leaders has been that as prime ministers of two countries which play such a central role in safeguarding and strengthening a global-based rules order, we are trying to align each other's approach towards the world, in our case, and towards the region. In Japan's case, that is the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. In our case, it is the Act East policy. Many of the discussions revolved around strengthening defense and security cooperation. There was a big economic component. I think it was most visibly expressed today in the groundbreaking of the high-speed railway project. There were important people-to-people relationship, people-to-people contacts in that area, some important outcomes, because I think both of us see it as creating also an enabling environment for more economic and security cooperation. And important among that is a language teaching initiative which was agreed to today. And broadly speaking, we agreed also to work with other countries trilaterally and to look at various issues where our interests converge. Now, starting with the defense and security cooperation, till now, broadly, the thrust of the contacts and cooperation has been on maritime security. And on this occasion, I think we agreed to explore cooperation and exchanges between the Army and the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, and also between the our Air Force and the Japan Air Self-Defense Force, as well as with the Coast Guard. There was discussion on defense cooperation, including technology cooperation, equipment cooperation. Recently, some of you would recall that Raksha Mantri had visited Japan and had very positive discussions. At this time, there is an ongoing issue on the US-2 amphibian aircraft, so those discussions continue. And we were really looking in terms of more technology cooperation and equipment collaboration, both in defense and dual-use technology. The connectivity was the second big theme. And again, both India and Japan share a principled approach towards how connectivity should be built. So that is expressed in the joint statement. In our view, connectivity should be open, it should be transparent, it should be non-exclusive, and it should follow responsible debt financing practices. Now, on the connectivity side, there was a greater focus this time on Africa. We do the IAFS, the India-Africa Forum Summit exercise. The Japanese have something called TICAD, which is the Tokyo International Conference on African Development. So the issue was, how do we mesh what are two, till now, what have been two autonomous reach outs towards Africa. Also on the connectivity side, there were two issues of interest within India. One was we agreed on to work in a much more focused and substantive way on the Northeast. And to that end, we agreed on a Japan-India Act East Forum, which will essentially explore the possibilities of involving Japan in the development of Northeast infrastructure. And as you all know, development of the Northeast infrastructure would help us really open out much more to Myanmar, Bangladesh, and beyond. So it would, in a practical way, really give sort of legs to our Act East policy. The other one, which was again ongoing, it was something they discussed last year as well, which was how to work together on smart islands. So there was some progress there. Then coming to economic issues, railways, of course, was the centerpiece of this visit. And railways, both in terms of groundbreaking for the station, the Sabarmati station, as well as the construction of the HSR Training Institute in Vadodara. But apart from high speed, we also work with Japan for the conventional railway system, and we've been on the metro rail system. And Japan has been really helping out with safety issues on rail as well. We just had a team here last month in regard to that. Japan has been closely involved with most of the flagship projects in India, Make in India, Skill India, Digital India, and each of these programs in some way found expression in our relationship. We agreed specifically on an investment promotion partnership, which was really putting together modalities which would further accelerate Japanese investments into India. And here again, in many of the big infrastructure initiatives, DFC, DMIC, a lot of the smart cities, Japan has been already closely involved. There was an agreement specifically for a Japan-India special program for Make in India, where there would be a regional project based in Gujarat. And also you will be seeing the start of the GIMS, the Japan Institutes of Manufacturing, which is under the Manufacturing Skill Transfer Program. And we are setting up four of these gyms in Gujarat, Karnataka, Rajasthan, and Tamil Nadu. And these are being done in collaboration with Japanese companies which are working in India. I refer to the language training. Apart from language training, we're also looking at internship programs. We are looking at human resources development programs. Then moving on to the ODA, we are Japan's largest ODA partner, and many of the ODA projects which were finalized in the course of this visit have really very major significance in terms of our own industry. I think among them was the shipbreaking recycling yard in Alang and Sosia in Gujarat, Northeast Road Network Connectivity, Calcutta East-West Metro Project, and a Gujarat Investment Promotion Program. I refer to the fact that Japan is already involved in a number of metro projects, all of whom are progressing, in the Mumbai Trans-Harbour Link project, as well as the Eastern Peripheral Highway in Delhi. The nuclear, again, Japan is a country with which we had worked to conclude a nuclear cooperation, civil nuclear cooperation agreement. That was concluded last year during Prime Minister's visit, and we were very pleased that Japan was able to ratify it. And we see really Japan as a very significant partner in many of our nuclear power projects, which we will be doing with other countries as well. Other than these, I think in terms of the sort of significant announcements, there was some discussion about easing visa requirements, requirement practices. So the Japanese side showed a lot of interest in encouraging more Indian tourism and was willing to look at that. Finally, a few words about political, global and regional political issues. Again, it was a very wide-ranging discussion yesterday and today. On ASEAN, I think both of us agreed that the unity and the centrality of ASEAN to regional architecture was very important. In terms of the peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, we both highlighted the importance of freedom of navigation, overflight, and unimpeded lawful commerce, and full respect to UNCLOS. There was a lot of discussion, understandably, on North Korea. And the Japanese side underlined their concerns in strong terms. It was an issue where we had a complete meeting of minds. And we have also indicated that we will be fully abiding by the UN Security Council Resolution 2375. Both of us agreed on the importance of holding accountable all parties that have supported North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. The other big issue which came up was terrorism. And again, Japan is a country which has always maintained that it has zero tolerance on this issue. And we agreed on rooting out safe havens, on disrupting terrorism networks, financing channels, and halting cross-border movement of terrorists. You will see in the joint statement, we have the two countries have specifically agreed to cooperate in dealing with threats from Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and other affiliates. UN reform is an issue on which Japan is a long-standing partner. As you know, they are also candidates for the permanent seat in a reformed Security Council. And the last big issue which came up here was APEC, where Japan was supportive of India's candidature. So this broadly is a summary of the discussions, the outcomes. Most of it is reflected in the joint statement in greater length, but I think this would sort of lay out the outlines of the discussions which have taken place. I hardly need to emphasize it was very warm, visibly warm, very comfortable interaction between the two prime ministers. They both noted, I think, that they were meeting for the 10th time. So you could really see that both country to country and prime minister to prime minister, this is a very strong and substantive relationship. So thank you very much, and we have some time for questions. Geeta?
On the development and cooperation in northeastern states of India, are there any projects that have been identified by both the countries, and any projects specific to Arunachal Pradesh? Also, a very strong statement on terrorism in Pakistan, especially terrorism emanating from Pakistan. We've seen these statements in the past where Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed have been mentioned. BRICS was one such forum, and now we see the Indo-Japan joint statement. Can India expect any action from the Pakistani side on that front?
On the Northeast, we've had some previous and in fact ongoing cooperation with Japan. Japan has assisted in some road building in the Northeast. But the intent this time is really to take it to a much higher level and both work with India, in the Northeast states, and also to see if both of us can synchronize our cooperation with the countries which border the Northeast states, so that the Act East policy, in a sense, benefits from that synchronization. exactly what will be the projects, that's something we have to work on. So I think this forum will meet in the coming weeks and months so that we work that out. On the terrorism issue, look, to my mind, these statements, and I'm not just talking about the India-Japan, you mentioned the BRICS statement also. I think they have value. They have value because when a number of countries publicly raise their voice on issues and say, look, this behavior is not acceptable to us, these kinds of groups are beyond the pale of normal politics, then what it does is it creates a narrative, because in Pakistan often these activities are justified, and if the world remains silent or looks away, then that justification is stronger. So the fact that I would suggest to you, whether it's the BRICS statement or a bilateral statement like this or other bilateral statements, I do believe they have an impact.
Second row.
So was there any mention, even in passing, of the Doklam standoff between India and China during the talks between the two leaders? And also, as you mentioned, the two sides in the joint statement have reaffirmed the importance of freedom of navigation and overflight. But I also noticed that you have dropped specifically a mention of South China Sea in the statement, which was there earlier, I guess, last year's. So why was that? Was it at your behest or was it at Japan's behest? Thank you.
Well, Doklam is not specifically mentioned in the statement. I think there was a discussion on regional and global developments yesterday in a broader sense of the term. In terms of the freedom of navigation in South China Sea, when you're referring to Indo-Pacific, South China Sea is part of the Indo-Pacific. So if you're referring to a full set, it's sort of the subsets are covered. It is. First of all, freedom of navigation and support for unimpeded commerce is not a matter on which we have a position with respect to a particular geography. It's a principal position which applies everywhere, including in other parts of the maritime domain as well. So even in some other cases, my recollection is, for example, if you look at the US joint statement, we decided that, look, if you are stating a principle, we don't have to limit a principle by necessarily introducing a geography unless it's particularly relevant. I think Indo-Pacific, in our view, covers it.
Yes, please.
Wondering what is coming in the way of conclusion of discussions on US2. It's been going on for a while.
That's not an easy question for me to answer because I'm not the negotiator. But my understanding is that often these very specific discussions which could lead to contracts, these are matters of very deep detail and there are a lot of complicated issues. So I'm sure they have a good reason. What I can tell you is that it's a serious discussion which is going on. Two more.
Yes, please.
Sir, the joint statement notes deepening and expanding maritime security cooperation, and you specifically mention anti-submarine aspects and maritime domain awareness. Is it in Indo-Pacific region, or you're talking globally? Is there a country-specific approach here? Because anti-submarine, they're generally owned by countries. So,
no, we are talking Indo-Pacific here. Because Indo-Pacific is the arena where the maritime domain awareness and the maritime cooperation is taking place.
We are running short of time. Maybe one last question. Yes.
So you mentioned that there was this discussion on North Korea, where both sides said that it was necessary to hold accountable all parties who supported North Korea's nuclear program. So I presume you're referring to China and Pakistan. So could you give us an idea of the flavor of discussions when it comes to these two countries?
Well, You know, I would put it to you this way, that today, because of the missile and nuclear tests, obviously North Korea has emerged very high on people's radar in terms of the concerns for global peace and stability. Now, we have long had concerns about proliferation networks and which have had a direct impact on our security. In the past, perhaps the world did not entirely sort of see that point of view, because often the feeling was that if it was our problem, it's our problem, but if it was their problem, it's everybody's problem. So I think there is a change today, and again, you know, this change we saw even when Prime Minister went to the United States. I think the fact that the North Korean program has come under sharper, closer scrutiny then warrants the some examination of its backward linkages. Now, I mean, you know as well as I do what those linkages are. I think last
Subhajit.
So, a related question. I mean, since the Rohingya refugee crisis is on, was there any kind of discussion between the two leaders, either yesterday or today? And India has just sent first relief material, humanitarian assistance to Bangladesh on the Rohingya refugee to the Rohingya refugee camps. How has this evolution of Indian position from a week ago in Myanmar to now, how has that taken place?
Look, I think the Rohingya issue did not come up for any specific discussion. I mean, there was some, sort of passing mention in the discussions. As regards what we are doing in Bangladesh, I think that will have to wait for his weekly press conference, because this conference is limited to India-Japan relations.
This concludes the briefing. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.